Hi, good evening, all. I'd like to welcome you all members and guests for today's IIRSM Qatar branch section. Myself, Deepu Ravi Kumar, Chair of IIRSM Qatar branch. So I'm so happy that we have been continuing the sessions online. Uh, Now the summer vacation has been starting. So after the summer vacation, we are planning to go back to our face-to-face sessions as well. We are trying our best. So in future sessions, when we have face to face, we will try to do it online also, both parallelly to run together, as we have been done for last year at the end, November, December. I believe we have tried face to face and online session together. So same way we will start again after the summer holidays. So I like to thank you all again for attending today's session. And it's my extreme pleasure to welcome Andy Farrell, fellow member of IIRSM, charter member of IOSH, and along he has many other membership as well. So it's my pleasure to invite him for today's session. He's author of Investigative Interviewing, a guide for managers, directors. So he's the manager director of founder of Management and Safety Training Limited. So it's my extreme pleasure to welcome him. So Andy, the stage is yours. And thanks a lot for accepting our invitation.
No, thank you very much for the invitation. It's much appreciated. And good evening, everybody from the UK. My camera's gone off, but I've got the screen up. I take it you can see the slides, all right? Is that okay?
Yes, we can.
I can see them clearly. Yes,
yeah, that's all right. Just that my camera disappeared. That's better, yeah. It's at least I can see what I'm doing now.
Your camera's back now, Andy.
Yeah, all I've got to do now is minimize it.
If you just click on the toolbar on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
And then it should bring everything back to the front. Can you see your presentation now?
Right, we'll leave it at that. Oh, there we go.
Perfect.
Right, that's close. Okay, so to proceed, incident interviewing is the way forward. I'll turn that camera off again. It's getting in the way. That's better. So it's just incident interviewing. It's part of the whole accident investigation process, but it is a very, very important part of the process because you're talking to the people involved to get the facts. So why interview? What's the point? Well, what you're trying to do is to establish the facts. Why? Because you want to prevent reoccurrence. Contrary to popular belief, the idea of an investigation is not just to find somebody to blame, somebody who's at fault, who's responsible for the accident. That's a byproduct. What you're looking to do is to find out what happened so you can therefore stop it happening again. And this idea of finding somebody to blame, it's actually a little old-fashioned idea, really. The whole idea of human error is debated by many safety academics. One in particular is a chap called Decker, Professor Decker, who is based, I believe, in Melbourne. And he argues that human error is the wrong term to use. We can't go into it at the moment. We haven't got the time for doing that. But even if you do find somebody who may be to blame, you need to establish why they made the error. Because that's the important thing. Why did they do what they did? Most people do not go to work looking to cause accidents. Most people try and do the job as best they can, and for some reason it goes wrong. And the idea of the interview is to try and find out what goes wrong. So if you were to stop the investigation when you think, right, I found the person who's at fault, you're actually only halfway there, because you may be wrong about the blame anyway, but crucially, you haven't found the cause of the accident. And that's the whole point of the investigation process, is to find the cause of the accident so you can stop it happening again. If you stop at that point, the sort of things you missed out on will be, for example, were they actually trained, or were they doing what they did, hoping they got it right, because nobody bothered training them? If they were given training, was it suitable for what they were doing? Was the training without error? Now, you may think, well, obviously the training's right, that's what it's there for. But I have come across quite serious cases where there was a flaw in the training and people were given the wrong information. One case in particular led to a fatal aircraft accident when an airliner went down. The pilot, who was new to that kind of aircraft, thought he was doing the right thing. In fact, he wasn't. He made a mistake. He did the wrong maneuver. But he didn't realize it until it was too late. The investigators found out that the training course he'd been on did not deal with that topic at all. So it wasn't his fault. It was the training that was flawed. It may be that the procedures are not suitable for the task. You can't just take that for granted. Maybe they're not. Was there a procedure available? Or maybe this incident that occurred, it was something totally unexpected, and they were simply doing what they could, basically make it up as they went along. So there's a lot of reasons why people can commit human error, why they can get things wrong. And if you stop at the point we found somebody to blame, then you're missing out all the crucial information about why they made the mistake. It's also important to make the point to staff that you're not just trying to blame people, because if staff think that the investigation is there just to penalize them, then they're not going to cooperate. Why would they? You know, they don't trust management. Management are looking for somebody to blame, somebody to hang this on. They're not going to put themselves in the firing line, so they will not cooperate with you. And you will quite often find the case like that the staff suddenly get sort of collective amnesia. They can't remember what happened. They didn't notice it. They didn't see it. They didn't hear it. They were looking the other way. They're not going to say anything to get themselves involved. So interviewing to blame somebody is the wrong approach. You interview to find out what happened so you can stop it happening again. Now, I mentioned that most people try and do the job properly. Okay, you may still find somebody telling what appears to be a lie. Yes, being realistic, some people may be a bit lazy, realize they didn't follow the procedures they should have followed, and therefore they're going to lie about what they did. But these people are in the minority, and I can't stress that too much. You've got to go into the investigation in the belief that they're trying to tell you the truth as they understand it. So why would they be reluctant to tell you the truth, or conversely, to accept what happened? Well, it may be they fear being sanctioned. They don't trust management. So even though they may believe that what they did was right at the time, they thought they were doing the right thing, then there's still this fear that the management are going to disagree and just use them as an example. So they're not going to cooperate. They're going to try and basically bluff their way around it, try not to get involved. It may be that they feel guilty about the incident, and that they just can't accept what happened. It's what's known as the second victim effect. They also become a victim to the incident. You may find, for example, take a simple case of somebody is hit by a forklift truck in the warehouse. Okay. Now the driver obviously is horrified at what's happened and somebody's been injured, and he was the driver. So you can always guarantee that when he's questioned about it, he's going to state vehemently that when that person stepped in front, he stamped on the brakes and he spun the wheel and he tried to avoid them. And it may be that the physical evidence shows that that didn't happen at all. There are no skid marks and the wheels are parallel to the vehicle body, so he wasn't turning at the time. This doesn't mean he was lying. Yes, what he's telling you is not correct, because of the shock of the incident, this second victim effect, he may truly believe that he tried to steer away from the accident. So when he tells you, I turned the wheel to try and avoid them, in his view, he's telling the truth, because that's what he believes. And you've got to respect that. You've got to treat him with compassion. Maybe they're lying or being careful with the truth, as it were, because they're trying to protect somebody else, maybe a friend or a colleague. Whether or not that person actually needs protecting, they may think that they're going to be in trouble, so they're trying to protect them to keep them out of trouble. And it may possibly be that they fear reprisals from other staff or from managers. An example of that would be an organization which makes a great show of having 0 accidents, 0 incidents, so many 100 days and nothing's ever gone wrong. Are they really going to say, actually, I've just had an accident or I've just caused an accident? Because maybe that means that people's bonuses disappear because now they've broken that 0 incident. So they're not going to say anything. They're going to try and put it on somebody else or blame the machine or whatever. So they're under pressure. And again, it's understandable. It's one of the difficulties you've got, as an aside, with these 0 incident systems. They look very good, but they take on a life of their own, unfortunately. So people can lie, not maliciously, and that's important. They're not doing it maliciously, but there can be a number of reasons why they don't want to admit or accept what happened. And your job as an investigator is to try and get around that and try and tease the truth out of them. So before you interview them, you've got to plan for the interview. You need to begin with to have an open mind. Now, this sounds very straightforward. Of course I've got an open mind, but have you really? People do tend to be affected. They have assumptions about what they think has happened. And that, if they're not careful, that can color the way they approach the investigation. So the way to check you have an open mind is to keep asking yourself, where are we going and how are we getting here? If I'm thinking something, why am I thinking this? If I think they've done something wrong, why do I think that? Where's the evidence? Can I prove it? You've got to be open to new ideas. Somebody could come up with something totally left field, an explanation you'd never thought about, but you can't reject it because it's unusual or you weren't expecting it. You have to give it due consideration. So having an open mind is a criterion for doing the interview, but it's not always that easy. You've got to practice at it. Then you're going to plan the interview by thinking who you're going to interview and, crucially, why are you interviewing them? What are you looking to get out of it? Did they see what happened, do you think? Do they know the background to what happened? Were they directly involved in what happened? Were they an observer? Were they the manager? You've got to get all these ideas clear in your mind. What was their potential role in what happened and what you're trying to find out? But don't just stick to, I want to know A, B, and C and leave it at that. It may be as the interview progresses, they reveal information about factors D and E. Well, fine, you may want to follow those up as well. So you have to be flexible, but you can't just go into an interview and think, well, you were at the accident, tell me what happened. It's not the best way to do an interview. Have an idea, a structure for where you're going to go with this, but be flexible with it. Think about the person interviewing. How are they likely to behave? Are they going to be aggressive, maybe? Maybe they think you're trying to blame them and they're guilty. They feel guilty. Whether they are meant to be guilty or not, they feel responsible. They're going to be aggressive and defensive. Or maybe having just seen the trauma of the accident, they're shocked. They're in trauma. So how are they going to be? Are they going to burst into tears? Are they going to freeze up on you and just say nothing because they can't even talk about it? You've got to think about these factors and how you're going to deal with them. Will the person need any kind of support? Possibly, are they having to work in, if they're a foreign worker, is this their first language? Or will they struggle with technical phrases? Will they need assistance? If they're in shock, will they need somebody with them? How are you going to deal with them? Then the crucial point of the room layout. And this is important. You could do it in the formal, as in the photograph, in the office scenario, if you like, where you've got the table between you. That's a fairly relaxed photograph there. It's not actually an office, more like a table in the dining room or restroom, but you still got the table between you and them. Now that can act as a barrier, whether you like it or not. It's a psychological barrier. So if you want to be formal about this, then that is emphasizing your position as the manager, the interviewer, whatever. But sometimes you may want to take an informal approach, just to talk, to chat, to let them talk. And so maybe you can think about using armchairs, sort of face to face, with a table to one side. So you're talking to them almost if you're in a lounge somewhere, and you've got your notes on the table at the side. And they're more likely to relax, they're more likely to talk. It all depends on who you're interviewing, what the topic is going to be, and basically how you want to play it. And the final thing is, of course, with the planning, is think about the documentation you may need. If, for example, there are photographs you want to show them, then have those photographs available with you at the time. If there are statements you want to refer to, or say maintenance records or whatever, have the document with you in a file. Don't lay it out ostentatiously, because that can be a bit threatening. Put it in a file at the side. You can get to it if you need it. Know whereabouts in the file it is as well. What you don't want to do is suddenly realize halfway through that they are referring to something and you've got a statement about that, or you've got a photograph of that, but you haven't got it with you, but you need to refer to it. And now you've got to suspend the interview while you wander off to find your paperwork. And that's bad for a number of reasons. You are losing the flow of the interview. You're trying to develop a rapport with the person, get their confidence. Now you've broken that by wandering off, and you've got to start all over again. And also, it just looks unprofessional. So make sure you've got your documents with you before you get things started up. Once you bring them in, then you set them at their ease. You know, you're not disciplining them, and you need to find out what they know. So you need to try and establish this rapport. So sit them down, relax them, maybe order them a coffee or a drink, make sure they're comfortable, maybe a couple of minutes, just small talk, how are you feeling, how's it going, and so on. But get them relaxed. Be aware, crucially, of their mental state. Now, regardless of whatever legal jurisdiction you're working under, morally, you've got a duty of care to that person. And they may well be traumatized. If they've seen a serious accident where somebody's been badly injured, or even worse, it's been a fatal and they've just lost a colleague, they're going to be mentally in a mess. So you've got to think about them. You need to interview them fairly quickly before they start forgetting things or mix things up. So it's important you get them quickly, but you can't trample over their feelings. You've got a duty to keep them safe, mentally safe. So think about that when you're talking to them. Explain the purpose of the interview, make it clear to them that you're not there to find somebody to blame. What you're trying to do is to find out what happened because you want to stop this happening again. You know, and there's your common link. Surely they don't want this to happen again. You don't want it to happen again. You have common purpose. So can we work together to try and sort all this out so somebody else doesn't get injured. And there's your way forward. Now, I'll explain why we're doing this later on, but take a mental note of how they're behaving when they're at ease with you, when they're best at ease that they can be, when they're relaxing. So are they looking at you? Are they looking away? Are they responding quickly or slowly? Are they sweating? Whatever. Just make a mental note of their condition before the interview starts. And I'll explain in a minute why we want to do that. Now, let's just deal for a moment with some common interviewing mistakes. They're easy to make, but they can be very, very damaging to the interview. Firstly is using a panel to interview the witness. Well, that's intimidating for a start. They're not going to relax. And a panel can be at cross purposes. And I've actually had experience of this on a training course I did for my accident investigation qualification. I'm an experienced investigator, experienced interviewer, having worked in law enforcement. But because of time restrictions, we did this exercise, and we had, I think it was 3 people on the interview panel with the person who's supposed to have got something wrong. And it didn't work. I was talking to this person, and he admitted later on that the way I was going, my casual, relaxed, see it from my point of view, I don't understand approach, please explain this to me. He realized I was boxing him into a corner, and eventually he was going to have to admit that he made a mistake. However, before he got to that point, my colleague, who was younger and less experienced, made a comment which was not helpful, a bit aggressive. And the subject, the tutor, grabbed hold of that immediately. You can't speak to me like that. I'm not sitting here to be insulted. And he walked out the room. Interview ended. He admitted later on in the debrief, because I did get him to confess eventually, but he admitted later on, I almost had him. I'd boxed him into a corner, and because my colleague had made that silly comment, that gave him the excuse to walk out. So panel members can be at cross purposes. So it's very disturbing, and you can lose a lot of information there. Another common mistake is to interrupt the witness when they're answering a question because you're trying to move things along. You've got to be patient. And what you have to do is remember, you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. So using that ratio, listen for twice as long as you talk, because the more they are talking, the more information you are getting. Don't ever be aggressive or triumphant, because that gives the witness the opportunity to walk out of the interview if he can argue you were being aggressive to him or insulting. And even if he doesn't feel he can walk out, then he's going to take against you and he's going to stop cooperating. So again, we're going to have this problem of amnesia. I can't remember. I didn't notice. I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything. I wasn't looking that direction. I can't help you. They're just not going to cooperate. Don't ask multiple questions at the same time. Things like, for example, were you told to go to the office, or did you go on your own behalf? And when you got there, was there anybody at the desk? I mean, which question should we answer now? There's 3 different questions in there. What you can do is confuse the witness, which is not helpful, but also if they want to avoid an awkward question, they can simply cherry pick which answer they want to give. So they answer the easy stuff and ignore the difficult stuff and hope you'll forget about it. And don't ask leading questions. These are questions that suggest the expected answer. Well, surely you were very annoyed when the boss was speaking to you like that. Suggest the answer, I must have been annoyed. It's better to say, well, how did you feel when the boss was bad to you? And that's not a leading question. Okay. Just a quick check. I've just got a warning. I might have unstable internet. Is this coming across all right? Please. Hello?
Yeah. I lost you for about a couple of seconds, but it might be my interference. But no, this is fine. This is fine for me.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks,
Okay, that's
Andy.
lovely. Just double checking. All right, thanks. Okay, so next slide. Point to remember, it is an interview and not an interrogation, and there's a crucial difference between the two. An interrogation is a one-way flow. It's hostile. The interrogator wants a specific answer to specific questions, not interested in anything else. And quite often a case of, why don't you just admit it was all your fault? And that's all they want, is you to admit it was your fault. They don't care if it's right or not. It's just the answer they want. An interview is totally different. An interview is a two-way. The investigator lays out the question, listens to what the person's got to say, and does listen, and will then ask further questions, supplementaries, to clarify what's being said or to expand on what's being said. But it is a two-way exploration, and you are cooperating with each other to get the information out there. He doesn't have and should not have a fixed idea of what he wanted to say. Remember what I said about going in with an open mind. An interrogator hasn't got an open mind, he's got a fixed idea. The interviewer has to have an open mind and then go with the flow as the interview develops. So it's a two-way flow. Now, the way to do the interview, there are many techniques you can use, but a very good one is to use this three-phase approach. That's called conversation management. It was actually developed in the UK by UK police, actually. It works very well. It's not oppressive, but it is very effective. So the first phase is you get the witness to tell you their story in their own words. So you give them time. You don't rush them and let them just talk. You only correct them if they're drifting off topic to bring them back onto topic. But otherwise, just let them use their own words and talk their way through, because you want their story. Then, once you've got the story, then you go back and you clarify things that aren't clear, or you expand upon points that they've made so you fully understand what it is they're saying. But you're exploring, you're not challenging, you're exploring to get the maximum out of the interview, to tease out all the available information. And in most cases, that's as far as you need to go, because they've told you what they can, the best they can. They have nothing else they can give you, and that's fine. There is a third phase, though, called the challenge phase, and that's used when the witness appears to be either lying or they're reluctant to answer the question. They're being almost like a politician. They're dodging around it, but they're not giving you a straight answer. Now, there could be a number of reasons why that. We said before why people may appear to be untruthful. There's a whole plethora of reasons why that could be happening, not all sinister, but you've got to try and get through this. So this is where you've got the challenge phase, where you start, as the name implies, to challenge them. Things like, I'm sorry, I thought you said at the beginning A, but now you're saying B, and I don't understand how those two go together. Can you explain that to me, please? So you're challenging, but you're not calling them a liar, but you're making it clear that there's discrepancies in what they're saying. Can they answer it or not? So that is the challenge phase. And if they are lying, that's when you can start to get a feel for what's going on. But always have compassion and think about their traumatized state. They may not be thinking clearly when they're talking to you. I've mentioned previously in question types about don't use leading questions. What you really want, a major question type, is the open question. So that's a question that can't be answered with a straight yes or no. Is it raining is a closed question because the answer is yes or no. What's the weather doing is an open question. They've got to give you some information. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for them to give you some information. And there's a technique you can use. It's called Ted's Pie, and it's very powerful again. So it's a set of key phrases which you can mix and match. So it's tell me, explain to me, describe to me, show me, precisely, in detail, exactly. So things like, tell me exactly what you were doing. Describe to me in detail how this machine operates. Show me exactly what you were doing at the time. These are questions which they have to give you full answers. They're not threatening, and they're very reasonable questions, but they are open, they're structured, and they will allow you to get more information from the interview. Now, a key question that people raise is, how do you test a witness's honesty? And again, honesty is flexible. You know, a person can be telling you something which isn't true, but they believe it is true. So in their mind, they're being honest. So it gets a bit philosophical. But let's look at some of the basic things to think about. So people in general conversation will often make mistakes and say the wrong thing. They'll say something that wasn't technically true. For example, I last saw him on Tuesday. No, it wasn't Tuesday. I saw him on Monday. So when he said I saw him on Tuesday, he wasn't lying. He simply made a mistake in his recollection. And that is normal dialogue. People do this all the time. So they're not lying. Lying is deliberately trying to deceive you. They're not. They're simply being human, and they got their dates mixed up. And that's because people don't have a perfect recall of events. So if they're not telling the truth, as in that they're giving you false information, it doesn't mean they're lying. It doesn't possibly mean they're simply making an honest mistake. Of course, the opposite of that is that if somebody gives you a perfect recollection of what happened in sequence with no mistakes, no errors, no, hang on, no, I got the wrong, no, what happened was, and then he said, if there's no errors at all, then either they've got very good recall of events, or possibly they're giving you a story that they've already rehearsed in their mind. So now what you do is gently challenge that. If you think that there's something going on, then you can gently challenge, because they may not have thought it through properly. It's especially the case if you get a number of people all giving you exactly the same story with the same descriptions and the same time frames. Then is that just coincidence? It could happen. Or is it a case that actually, for some reason, they've decided to concoct a story between themselves? You don't know why, but you need to try and find out. Remember, of course, that people may be deceitful against their will if they're being threatened by work colleagues. And we've mentioned these reasons already, but bear in mind, there can be a lot going on in the background that you don't know about. So you've got to try and see things from their point of view. Remember that as the phrase is, the devil is in the detail. So if a person has, for whatever reason, if they've chosen to lie, the odds are, as I indicated previously, they haven't thoroughly thought it through. So by using open questions, you can press them for details. You know, no, I didn't see what was happening because I was on the phone. Oh, okay. Who were you ringing? Ah, you know, well, right. Well, I was, no, I was ringing. I know now they're starting to think, because now they've got to try, if they are lying, they've got to try and work out who it was they were talking to. And then you can ask the question, what were you talking about? You know, how did it go? Where did you get the number from? You know, they will not thought the details through. So eventually they will realize that there are cracks in their story, and they may, with a bit of coaxing, decide to tell you the truth. The more lies they tell, remember, the more they've got to remember. So they're trying to remember their cover story. Now they're trying to remember the lies they've told. And if you're pressing them, they've got to try and think of more lies, which will fit in what they've already told you. And they're doing this on the run without appearing to hesitate. It's what you might call mental gymnastics. It's unlikely to happen, but if you do get somebody who's deliberately lying, this 1 in 100, if you like, then that's a good way of spotting it, because they will not, unless they're very, very nimble mentally, they'll not be able to keep up with all the details. Another technique you can use, and again, it sounds a bit challenging, it's one I wouldn't use all the time, but it's a possibility, is to ask them to tell the story backwards. Now that sounds ridiculous, but it means they've got to concentrate. And so if they're doing that, and they're actually telling the truth, which is good, by coming backwards, the concentration could mean they're giving you more detail. So you're not just trying to trip them up, but it is a way of getting more information out of them. But it does sound bizarre. And some people may think that's just a trick. You're just trying to trap me. So I'd use that very sparingly, but it can work. As I say, if they're deceiving you, then you're putting them under strain. They've got to remember what they've already told you, what's real, what's fiction. And not only try and remember the story, try and remember the story backwards. And that's got to stress them out. So it's a good technique, but used sparingly. Now, there's a lot said about body language. There's a lot talked about it, and many books on it. And it's true, body language, the way somebody behaves, can give an insight into what a person's thinking or what a person's feeling. It's very powerful. But, and this is why I put this in red in bold, it's very easy to misunderstand body language if you're not trained in it. Now, I'm not formally trained in body language. It's something that interests me. It's something I'm mindful of, but I wouldn't rely on it 100% to try and decide if somebody's being honest or not. It is a fact that I would take into account. Some examples of how easy it is to get things wrong with body language is the urban myths that are going around. For example, there is the myth that a liar will not look you in the eye when they're lying. And in fact, you've got this phrase, certainly in English, you've got this phrase, look me in the eye and say that. It's a challenge. You can't lie like that. If you can look me in the eye, you must be telling the truth. Which sounds very reasonable, very helpful. But there has been research done in the USA with students, I think. No, it wasn't a student, my mistake. See, I tell a lie. It wasn't students. The research was done looking at interviews of people who had actually been charged with offences before they went to court, and they compared what they said against what actually happened. And they discovered that half the people who were lying were looking the investigator in the eye as they lied. They know they were lying because they were convicted, but they actually looked them straight in the face and they told their false story. So looking someone in the eye and not lying, it doesn't really work. It just depends how good a liar you are. Another body language myth is that they will give themselves away by licking their lips. Okay, the reasoning behind that theory is that licking your lips is due to adrenaline. You're under stress because you're lying and you know, and you're trying to get away from it. So you're under pressure. Adrenaline is released into the body, and the side effect of adrenaline is it makes you thirsty. So you lick your lips. Right, that works, that's fine, correct. The problem is that somebody who's perfectly honest and who's telling the truth, but actually could really do with a cup of coffee, they've got dry lips and they'll lick their lips. So you can't take that as an indication on its own. Aha, got you, you're lying. No, it's not, it's just got dry lips. So these are very powerful, these sort of key indicators, but you've got to be careful how you do it. I watched a program recently on UK TV. They were looking at people who'd actually been interviewed by the police, major crimes, and they were getting experts to analyse what they were saying and how they behaved. And one chap who was an expert in body language. And his argument was that when the detective put a point to the person, although they were denying it, they were nodding their head slightly. He said, look, that's what's happening. The body is giving it away. He's saying no, but his body is saying yes. He's nodding. He's agreeing. He's confessing. And it all sounded very dramatic. But I was thinking, is that really true? Because somebody could say to you something which you know is totally wrong, and you want them to hurry up so you can explain why they're wrong, so you can nod to them in agreement. Not you're agreeing with what they're saying, but yes, I hear what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. Doesn't mean to say I agree with what you're saying. So you could be nodding, not as a confession, but as basically a subliminal, will you please hurry up and finish so I can tell you where you've gone wrong. So I do think he, expert or not, had got that one wrong. But there you go. So the thing about doing body language is that you're looking for changes to show when people are being stressed. And that is why I said at the beginning, when you're settling the person down, you're offering the coffee, you're actually watching what they're doing. Because you are, as they say, you're getting a baseline of what their responses are when they're not under pressure, or when they're at least reasonably relaxed. They're not going to be that relaxed, they're in an interview, but at least they're not being challenged. So how do they behave? Do they look you in the eye when they're talking to you? Do they look away? I mean, to go back to this idea of, not looking at somebody because you're lying at them, there are certain, I think in the Far East, there are certain cultures where to look somebody in the eye is considered very disrespectful. So somebody looks away from you when they're talking because they're trying to be polite to you, and you misinterpret it, they're lying through their teeth. You have to be very careful with body language. So you want to get this baseline of how they normally behave, the way they look at you. Are they licking their lips all the time? Are they shuffling around or sitting calmly? Are they sweating? Are they slow to answer or fast to answer? And that is giving you your baseline. Now, as the interview progresses, you want to keep an eye on how they are behaving. Because if their body language starts to change, that could show that they're under stress. If, for example, when you were talking to them normally, they answered quite straightforwardly without any hesitation, but now you ask them some questions and they're going, I'm sorry, you mean, no, I don't understand. Sorry, say that again. Are they misunderstanding you, or are they trying to gamble for time while they think of an answer? It could be either, but they're not behaving as normal. So there's something going on. They're under stress, but you don't know why they're under stress. Sometimes it's fairly obvious. If the person starts to shuffle around, well, they're probably under stress because but it could also be they want to go to the toilet, too embarrassed to say so. What you have to do is you look at the body language changes, if there are any, and then notice you're not looking just for a single change, such as he's a bit slower in answering the questions. It may be he's trying to be helpful and giving them extra attention before he gives you the answer. So he's helping you, he's not lying to you. So you can't go for a single change in body language. What you need to look for is to get a cluster of changes which all occur at the same time. So he's no longer looking at you, he's looking down, and he's more hesitant, and he's starting to shuffle a little bit. Now, that as a cluster suggests that that question you've asked him has somehow caused him stress. Doesn't mean he's lying, but there's something going on. Now, whether you proceed with that questioning or not, or whether you save it and come back to it later another time, that's a tactical decision. But you've got an indication there that there's something going on, but not, and I do stress this, it doesn't mean they're lying. It just means that something is worrying them for some reason. And you can go no further with that. Okay, so 10 to 6, we're plodding nicely on time. So let's just go through what we've done. The first thing is an action investigation is not like an ordinary disciplinary or management interview. An action investigation involves people who may well have been traumatized by what happened, what they saw, what they did, what they failed to do, whatever the situation is. So it's an unusual situation. And so the rules of interviewing, if you like, change a little bit. It's not a case of I'm the manager, I'm interviewing you, you will answer. You've got to be a little bit more cautious. You've got to think about the person's mental health. And this is important. I can't really stress this too much. You've got to think about their mental health and their mental welfare. Whether they did something wrong or not, and you don't even know at this stage. So you've got to adjust the tone and the tempo of your questioning. If we go back to this slide, we had the 3 stages of interviewing, the conversation management. If you go into the challenge phase for some reason, and this person is really getting distressed, then the ethical thing to do is to stop the interview. It's as simple as that. Okay, you've hit a nerve with this person somehow. You haven't established what it is that's upsetting them, but they're giving you a story which doesn't quite hold up. And when you probe it gently, it's obviously causing them a great deal of distress. You've got to think about their mental health. So you don't just plow on to get a result. Again, the difference between an interview and an interrogation. An interrogation, you'd rub your hands a bit glee and keep on going because you're getting something out of this and you don't care what happens to the person. But an interview is different. You've got to think of them as a person, and no investigation is worth damaging somebody's health. So you would, if necessary, stop the interview. Now, whether you do it for a couple of minutes while they have a quick cup of coffee and get their breath back, or you may suspend the whole interview and decide, you know, leave it be, we'll speak again at some later stage and go back, do some more investigation on what they've revealed so far. It's a matter of use tactics, but you never ever put somebody's safety in jeopardy just because you want to complete the interview. And of course, the whole point of the interview is purely to establish the facts. But you, as I say, you don't do it at the cost of damaging somebody's psychological health and well-being. You're not looking to blame, you're not looking for error. You may find that people have caused errors. Okay, fine. The next question is why? And there is a complete science, if you like, in human error and a lot of discussion about it. There are arguments that human error is not the person. It basically indicates a problem with the system. So you may have to dig down further. Now, of course, some managers may like the idea that you come up with an answer which says, yes, there was a mistake. That particular employee did get it wrong, but he got it wrong because your systems are faulty. We've got to do something with your systems. They may not like it, but you're going for the truth. If it's the truth, you can't change it. So there we go. I've enjoyed doing the seminar. I hope you've enjoyed listening. I see from the log at the side, there's still people there. Great. I think it's been getting bigger as we went along, even better. So just to summarize, the instant interviewing is a lot of components, and obviously I can't go through everything in an hour. So I've just touched upon some of the key topics, but I hope you found that interesting and has stimulated it. If you feel I can help you or your organization, then there's my email address there. By all means, drop me a line. And also, I've actually written a handbook on investigative interviewing. It's not perfect. I never claimed that it was, but it gives you a starting point. And if you want to purchase that, well, there it is, complete with a pretty slide on the front. So you can purchase that online. But that's it essentially from me. So I shall stop talking here at this point. I'll put my camera back on if I can. And if there's any questions have come through, by all means, let me know. And we can take it from there. So,
hello, Andy. Hello, Andy. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Yes, no problem.
Hello, and thank you very, very much for that. At the end of the day, I'm the health and safety manager for Larsen & Toubro in Qatar, and at the end of the day, nobody likes doing investigations. Nobody likes doing interviews because you're dealing with failure at the end of the day. And just a couple of questions here. I spent some time with Surrey Police doing interview techniques for conflict issues. And one of the things that I'd like to hear from you is how soon after the accident should you conduct these interviews? Bearing in mind some of the comments that you said earlier on, that the interviewee may have just witnessed his colleague die or break his neck. And the biggest question is how soon after an investigation should we start conducting these interviews so that we do get reliable information from the interviewee?
Yeah, the problem is it's a two-edged sword. If you delay the interview, then what will happen is naturally people will talk to each other. They're bound to. And that can affect their recollections. They can, without realizing it, they can absorb comments made by other people and they put it into their own narrative without realizing. And also some detail can get forgotten. So you want to get the person as soon as possible after the incident, and always interview individually, not in groups. Again, there's psychological reasons for doing that. So you want to get them as soon as possible, but you have to think about their psychological safety, and you don't want to put them under stress. So there is no simple answer. It's a judgment call. If you can at least get the basics out of them, that's a start, and then maybe go back and do a supplementary interview when they've calmed down, but at least get the basics from them. But if you can, and you can do it without stressing them too much, and they cooperate, then the more information you get, the better, because it's fresh in their mind, and there's not been inadvertently adjusted by talking to other people. Does that help?
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, second question, and it was your point that you made earlier on about being open-minded when interviewed, and some of the problems that one can face, and I think it's referred, and please correct me wrong, cognitive destructive theory, where you go into the interview and in your mind you already know how the accident happens, and therefore you're only looking at black and white. So in your opinion, I'm probably going to answer my own question here, bearing in mind that health and safety managers generally don't suffer that trait of cognitive destructive theory, who in your opinion would be best to lead the interview or conduct the interview?
You basically, it's somebody who's got to be neutral, really. They've got no axe to grind. They're there to find out what happened. They don't have allegiances. They don't have a reputation to protect or somebody else's reputation to protect. They are there to try and help, to find out what happened. It's an argument to some extent for using external consultants, but yeah, there you go. But no, they're going to try and be neutral where possible. You can have things like unconscious bias. So one of those is confirmation bias, that you think you know the answer. So without realizing it, any information you get which supports your theory, you tend to accept quite happily. If the information goes against that, then you tend to minimize or reject, and you don't even realize you're doing it. It's unconscious bias. So at times the investigator's got to sit down, and it's sometimes helpful to have a manager who's independent, acting as a mentor, if you like, as a sounding board, who will say, yeah, okay, you're saying this. Where is your evidence? How do you know? Or are you assuming? You know, test what you're doing. Are you on the right track, or have you inadvertently got bias creepy in there? And if so, go back and do it again, you know, adjust. So yeah, keeping an open mind is very difficult, because you almost instinctively think, we know what happened here. And you go into it and it's all totally wrong. There was a case I looked at recently in Canada, where 2 paramedics were called out to what they were told, what they thought and assumed was somebody being shot in the stomach with a BB air gun, an air pistol. So it was a minor injury. And they totally discarded, because they were convinced that's what it was, and they dealt with these before, they totally discarded the evidence of the way the patient was behaving. And they ignored it completely. And they were thinking, no, it's a minor injury. His behavior is something else. And they put it down to some kind of psychiatric attack. And they were taking him to a psychiatric hospital when his body systems collapsed, and he died an hour later. And he died through internal bleeding. He'd been shot in the stomach with a pistol, not an air pistol. And all the symptoms he was displaying on the ground, which they had put down wrongly because they had made an assumption, they put it down to psychiatric, was actually him getting hyper aggressive because he was bleeding to death, and they missed it completely. So unconscious bias is a powerful subject. An open mind is very difficult to keep. You've got to keep checking with yourself, how do I know? Or have I drifted off on a tangent by mistake? Does that help at all?
Yes. Thank you very much. Okay, well, I don't have any, because your presentation covered most of what I was lacking anyway. So no, thank you very much for that, and I'm sure our audience enjoyed that.
One point I would make, though, you said about safety managers don't like to deal with fault. The problem is that it's only by dealing with things that go wrong that you can actually adjust so they don't go wrong again. It's not a pleasant thing to.
Yeah. No, I understand. Yeah, so you know, like all the traits that a safety practitioner possesses is you know, you'd probably put down, for me, is okay, the accident investigation side down. Now, I agree that every accident investigation should not be to abortion blame.
Yeah.
But unfortunately or not, blame will arise, because that's what the courts are for, and that's what disciplinary procedures are for. But I think that's, you know, as safety practitioners, we stay clear of that accident investigation no blame culture, present our reports, then it's up to the corporate to decide what actions to take. And I think that's what's covered in your presentation here, is both a accurate and objective investigation. And then, you know, because I maintain to my guys that the investigation there has to be thorough, correct, and non-biased, but it's not a part of the disciplinary process. That is not our job to do that.
No, you can't.
Yeah, and it makes it difficult to put in an investigation report and express an opinion, because obviously an investigation is generally based on objective evidence that you've gathered through site evidence, photograph, interviews, etc. Sometimes, you know, I like to put you know, conclusion. In my opinion, it was, and you know, and I think I've read a lot of HSE investigation reports when I was studying. And they had a knack of, they included in their report a conclusion bit, which just basically sounds up the whole investigation process as to this is why this incident happened. But no, as I said, for me, investigations are because something went wrong. There's a body in the ground or somebody's in hospital, where obviously we're on the proactive side of health and safety. Okay, but that's no. Thank you for answering those questions.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
I don't think, or I can't see any other questions, Julie.
I've just got one, and that is, will the presentation slides be available afterwards?
Yeah, subject to copyright.
That's up to you, Andy. If you don't feel comfortable sharing your presentation, people will have the recording to refer back to. So it's purely up to you.
If somebody wants a copy for their own training purposes, I mean, I've got my name all over it anyway. So yeah, I don't mind. Yeah. If they drop me an email, I'll send them a copy of the slides. Not a problem.
Okay, thank you. So I think that's all with the questions. So I'd like to thank you for yet another interesting presentation. I always learn so much when you're speaking. And thanks to Deepa and Reese for your time as well. Thank you for everyone for attending. I hope you found it as informative as I did, and I hope to see you at the next Qatar branch webinar. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.